Hey y'all, it's Key. I'm back for another stream. This is Primitive, and today we are going to be continuing with our study session. Before we get too deep into this, I just want to tell you about the updated links that I have in the description below. What you're going to find is that I actually refactored the study guide, so there's a new link for that. This new study guide instead now will be focused specifically on the foundational level 1 examination, and it has broken the official study guide down into a 4 week or 4 week plan basically, where the goal is to really just study 4 days a week. So it's very generous, very forgiving, especially if you don't have a lot of time. Each of the days here has some specific reading as well as specific topics. So be sure to check this out if you're interested in following along. I have refactored this is like my third time refactoring this. I'm pretty sure this is going to stick like the way it is right now. But in the event that it does change, just keep following the series. By the end, it should obviously be resolved. I'm making this because I want you to be able to follow along the journey as well and also benefit from my study habits and the things that I find useful in my own journey. In this, by the way, there are prompts here. This prompt here will basically generate a some lecture notes for you as well. This should work whether or not you're doing this with the study guide because the study guide um, references the actual documentation site. So use this to help you construct a daily plan if you're trying to do the TOGAF certification for level 1 at least. The reason why I removed the level 2 part of this is because it level 2 is more of a practicum. It is more about the actual process of utilizing this, and that is a very heavy lift. And trying to do that this and that part in 6 weeks is super aggressive. This is already aggressive, but trying to do both of these things is extremely aggressive. If you get through the foundations part, you may not necessarily want to go to level 2, but if you do, this is going to actually prepare you super well. So this is a very generously crafted study plan, ideal for someone who may be in between jobs or have a lot of free time. So the second link you're going to find is just a link for the direct documentation as well. This is the primary resource. The level 1 test is not open book, but you will want to familiarize yourself with this documentation because you'll be coming back to this as your go-to resource from this point onwards. When you get to the level 2 certification, then it is open book and this will be your main resource. So those are the two things. I also, by the way, am using Speechify to help me. I like to use Speechify because it's much easier to focus when you can engage your senses. So I'm reading my copy of the PDF here on the left, and I'm listening and following along with Speechify as it talks to me and whatever it's AI think my voice sounds like, which is kind of creepy. Um, Another thing, this isn't super important. You can't share gems yet, but this is a custom gem I made. In this Gemini gem, I have loaded up the documentation. This is the official study guide, and then these other three. These are the actual PDF version of the doc site. So this custom gem basically is something I can use to make reference to the material and to ask questions to clarify my understanding. Sidebar, when you're studying and you're trying to learn something, especially something new, very difficult, that requires lots of memory, what I recommend is not only to do highlightations, but to ask questions and to challenge your understanding by putting things in your own words. A great technique that I like to use is I will oftentimes instruct my chatbot. Here, we'll do it right now. I'll say, as we talk through today's session, I would like for you to have a casual tone and explain things to me like you're my homeboy Craig from the movie Friday. It's a little cringy, okay? You don't have to do Craig. You can do whatever you like. Ash Ketchum from Pokemon or whatever. Lindsay Lohan, I don't know, whatever you want to do. the point here is that you want to take like these high-minded conceptual things, and you want to basically have the chat bot translate them into something you can actually understand, so you can get to that understanding portion of things much more quickly. And if you do that, then you're going to find that there are fewer gaps in your understanding, and it's going to be easier to kind of like, you know, especially when there's lots of like specialized vocabulary. It's going to help a lot. So this is gonna be my little cringy way of doing this. It's also entertaining and funny. I like the amusement of it all. Um, so do that. And then the second part is get you a notepad, because people who write things down are more likely to remember things. When you start writing physically your notes as opposed to just doing highlightations, it activates your brain, activates your active recall as well. And anytime you're like getting more involved with the material you're learning, your brain is more likely to cling to it. So take it from me. I taught software engineer teacher for 2.5 years. The big thing I realized is that students who engage with the information more actively are more successful in mastering and taking ownership of it. And that's what you want to do here. You want to take ownership of the information, not just glaze over it. Because it's very possible to glaze over a bunch of stuff and not remember a dang thing, and also not be able to use it for anything. Okay, so that being said, let's take a look at our study guide for today. I don't think I'll need to use my prompt today, because I'm just going to focus on the reading material. We are on day 3, Wednesday, uh, and today we're reading sections 2.9 through 2.4. And here are the main things. We're going to talk about the enterprise continuum, architecture repo, content framework, enterprise meta model, architectural capability, risk management concept, gap analysis. Uh, in the in chapter 2, there's also a test. We did the test yesterday, so I don't need to be too concerned with that. We're going to keep it simple. It's Wednesday, it's hump day, energy's low, and I only have about an hour and a half or so of study time anyways. So it's good that we already covered this stuff yesterday, so I should be able to go through this quite efficiently and make this a relatively short stream. So let's go ahead without further ado and get into this. Okay, so we're talking about the we're talking about the enterprise continuum. Enterprise continuum is basically this idea of how do you classify and organize these um, artifacts. You can have architectural ABBs, which are architectural building blocks. You can have solution building blocks as well, architectural artifacts and solution artifacts. These are the things that you would be storing or keeping to define what your architecture is. And architectural continuum, basically what that is um, this is like a description of the capabilities, so without a specific solution being applied. The solutions continuum is like, what are the actual ways we're going to do this, right? So the difference between architecture is like saying, I need a server. This server needs to allow users to make a transaction. Whereas a solution is like, I need a node server that has an API endpoint that connects to a Postgres database with this schema. So solutions are actual detailed descriptions of what is going to be made, whereas architecture is like just a description of the capabilities that are solving or addressing like an abstract concern. And this continuum for either the architecture or the solution can start off being generic. So the beauty of having a framework like TOGAF is that it gives you lots of generic tools and templates and reusable things, but they may not always apply directly to your enterprise or your organization. And so what you try to do is you try to take these generic things and you try to move them towards some type of more specific thing, a specific architecture or a specific solution that fits your organizational needs. And then at the end of this solution, once it's specified for what your needs are, then that obviously gets made and deployed. That's where like the engineering actually happens. Um, there could be like some prototyping or some spike work or something like that ahead of all of that, but it gets that solution gets made and deployed, and then that becomes a part of the architecture context, and that architecture context can be used to make or to adjust requirements that can further change that architecture. So the other part of this too is like um, as you're refactoring or changing your architecture and creating new solutions, there is a need for change management. That change management is going to include risk assessment and risk management as well. And that's going to be, how do you get from the baseline architecture to your target architecture in as safe of a manner as possible? That's going to come up at the end of this chapter. Okay, so our notes here. Enterprise repository includes requirements, architecture repository. We have not talked about the requirements repository. That must be coming up later. We did talk about the architecture repository. The architecture repository is this monster here. These are all the different things that you need to be able to keep track of, because when you're doing architecture work, there's going to be like governance happening. There's going to be approvals and people making decisions. There's going to be board meetings and stuff like that. You have an architecture board, and you need to have a place where you can track all of these things so that people are on the same page. Also, too, so that when you're talking about architecture, you have like definitive resources that you can point to in those discussions, so that you can reduce conflict. And so that's where everything ends up living. We have not been introduced to design stores or CMDBs. That sounds like YMCMB, Young Money, Cash Money, but that, I know that's a different thing. So we'll move on. Uh, so the enterprise continuum provides structure and classification for assets and enterprise repositories. Yeah. So this is not just for architecture repository. This is for a lot of other things. Okay. So enterprise repositories provide resources to be classified within the enterprise continuum. Okay. So these are just, yeah. So these are, so to sum this up, these are just the types of resources and where they generally fall. Architecture guides and supports solutions guide and support architecture. You can see here generalization for reuse and adaptation for use. So generic is reusable, and specific is less reusable. Okay, and there's probably some type of criteria for how generic to make things. Um, okay, so yeah, we can go ahead and move on.
The simplest way of thinking of the enterprise continuum is as a view of the repository of all the architecture assets. It can contain architecture descriptions, models, building blocks, patterns, architecture viewpoints, and other artifacts that exist both within the enterprise and in the IT industry at large, which the enterprise considers to have available for the development of architectures for the enterprise. A distinction is made between architectures and their possible solutions, thus creating an architecture continuum and a solutions continuum. As shown in Figure 2, the relationship between them is one of guidance and support. 14.
Okay, so I think another note here too is, I don't believe that there is like a strict division between these two categories. Um, you got to think, when you have a piece of architecture, you're going to be on a journey to do solutioning, and that solutioning is going to probably start off with a set of assumptions based on architecture, and then that solution is going to evolve as you test those assumptions and also gather the technologies needed to support the actual architectural goal. And that is going to happen over time. You're going to have to go out and build a prototype of something. You're going to have to go out and do some research. You're going to have to go out and make a decision matrix to decide between this versus that. You may even have to, you may even discover, I would imagine that some of your desires or capabilities might not be possible or might work in a different way than you thought. So this is going to be like a continuum, or not a continuum, but there's going to be some transitional work to get from the architecture to the solution. And then I would imagine that even by the time you get to the deployment and finally making something, you might still learn things that challenge. So hopefully you will have architected and made a lot of sound decisions along the way, so you don't have to waste your time. But as an engineer, I've definitely been on teams and in places where, you know, it's just not perfect, and it's never perfect. Like you can never completely reduce the risk. By the way, the risk reduction, the risk management stuff, it's really about how do you how do you reduce the likelihood of unknowns? I think I took a note about that yesterday. Actually, there was like a way they described it. Um, so the risk management is about reducing the uncertainty as you make your way towards objectives, and uncertainty is any deviation from what's expected. So those uncertainties can be positive or negative. You cannot completely get rid of uncertainty, however, but there is a um, I can't read my handwriting. There is a de-risking. That's what that says. I write like a doctor with a head injury. That was terrible. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Okay, so there's a de-risking process. There's also levels to risk. The risks that are happening before you do all of this, the risk is called initial level of risk. And then the residual risk is like whatever is left over after you've done your de-risking process. And all that ends up mattering when you do the migration. And the migration is where you go from whatever your baseline architecture is to the new thing. So the solution's kind of what's getting you there. So I don't think you can really, like, functionally, none of this is meaningful unless you understand that there is a change process happening um, anytime you're dealing with architecture. Okay, so let's continue forth.
The enterprise continuum supports two general ideas: reuse where possible, especially the avoidance of reinvention, and an aid to communication. The assets in both the architecture and solutions continuums are structured from generic to specific in order to provide a consistent language to effectively communicate the differences between architectures. Understanding where you are in the continuum helps everyone to communicate effectively. Use of the enterprise continuum can eliminate ambiguity when discussing concepts and items amongst different departments within the same organization, or even different organizations building enterprise architectures. Understanding the architecture helps to better understand the solution. Being able to explain the general concept behind a solution makes it easier to understand possible conflicts.
Okay. Um, so there's two ideas: reuse where possible, and this also aids in communication as well. So a good example of the communication part of this is if you've have you ever been like at a job and let's say you're an engineer or any job really, and you go to a job and there's like a lot of things happening. um, your business is very complicated. Your relationship to your client or your stakeholder is very complicated. Maybe it's not a straightforward thing, right? Someone's really sat down and thought of a very sophisticated plan for how to provide whatever service you're providing. Um, so the challenge in this is like you have people who are in the know, and then you have people who were not in the know. You have people who are very intentional and specific about language, and then you have people who are not so good at that. And this can become really, really problematic because when you're making changes, changes have a ripple effect. It's not just the one little piece that you're changing. It's like if I change one thing here, this could have unknown consequences. So I need to have some type of established way to be able to present my ideas for what to change and be able to communicate that effectively so people know what I'm talking about in as exact terms as possible. So by having these like architectures and solutions really well described, and also very well tailored for what your actual for your reality of your business your or of your application is, then it allows people to have that conversation in a good way. Um, so excuse me. So that's why it's saying here consistent language. And specificity is really important. Maybe not always like in verbal communication, but if you're going to like send an email or you're going to show a plan to someone, just remember that there's this idea of the meta model. So, what the meta model, what that term means is that TOGAF or anything similar is a generic framework. Your business, your enterprise, your organization very likely has its own very specific use cases that are going to show up in whatever solutions or architecture you're creating. And that specific language needs to be agreed upon so that people can use it. And the more specific your implementation of all of this is, then the more important it's going to be to have that agreement on the language and on the what, right? And that's kind of the purpose of all this architectural documentation is to really say, okay, this is what it is. So without that, it's just going to be a mess. And the mess is that you can have conflicts, um, but it's not just conflicts. You could um, have a lot of uncertainties as well as you're building and making changes. So another thing too I've noticed is I've been in like software development. Let's say like we're in a design meeting, for example. Um, Design meeting is going to happen. Um, well, it depends what you're designing, but let's just say that you're in a team that doesn't have good architecture and you're sitting down to design a solution. A lot of times what happens is people might be too quick to get to the solutionings part, and they also may not understand that there's a distinction between architecture and solutions and what that actually means. So when you start jumping into the solutions part too early, you could be missing a lot of things. You could be missing a lot of things. You could be making a lot of assumptions, and then you could be buying into a solution that is not very well fitted for your actual requirements. So this architecture phase needs to be its own distinct thing that kind of ends up phasing into solutioning. And then solutioning obviously is going to phase into implementation and then deployment. Okay, so, and just remember that this whole thing is about change. It's about change. So every time you make a change or make a new solution or work towards a new solution, you're changing architecture, which means you have to go back, understand what that new architecture is before you can make a new solution. And you can have architectures that are across the enterprise as well that you might have to understand. Let's say that your organization has its own architecture for whatever it's making that has to be operable with some other organization's architecture. And then there's might be some overlap, you know, so that can make things really complicated. So eliminate ambiguity when discussing concepts and items amongst different departments. That's important. That ends up being quite a headache when it's not done well. I always think about the situation when someone is like new to a company and has no understanding of the architecture, which was like literally my first job. Massive, complicated architecture. Really, every job I've had actually. Actually, every job I've had. Now I think about it, Every job I've had did a terrible job at like explaining the architecture to me. And then when I would ask questions, I would discover that there was architecture, but it was not documented according to any kind of best practices. And people were more or less using tribal knowledge. I know the word tribal is not, it's a cancelable word. They're using knowledge that is implicitly understood by the people who have been there for a while, basically. And that is no bueno, especially if you have a lot of turnover. Um, a lot of turnover. So, yeah, the ambiguity just kills me. When I interview for a job, that's gonna be one thing I ask is like, how do you keep track of what are your architectural practices and how are you keeping track of like these decisions and how they trickle down into engineering? Uh, and that's a good question to ask because when you go into a job, you're gonna need to learn what it is you're working with. It's not enough to just know like, okay, I need to build this component or make this thing look this way or at this API endpoint. Sure, like there are some jobs that are they is very much like assembly line. But if you're working for like a smaller company or you're like doing research and development or you're working on a team that has lots of cross-functional work and stuff, the better you can engage with the architecture, even as not being an architect, the better off you're going to be. Um, and the more independent you're going to be as well. So understanding architecture helps to better understand the solution. Being able to explain the general concept behind a solution makes it easier possible to understand, easier to understand possible conflicts. Okay. Yeah. So the concept behind a solution. Okay, that makes sense. Let's continue fourth.
Operating a mature architecture capability within a large enterprise creates a huge volume of architectural output.
What do they mean by architectural capability? Um, I mean, I know what those words mean, but I feel like architectural capability, since it's capitalized, it must be a vocabulary word. I don't have a clear idea of what that vocabulary word actually means. So I could probably look it up in the, there's actually a terminology section in here. Let's go check there first. It's not in here. That's annoying. Don't give me a capitalized word, proper noun, that's what it's called, and not tell me what the word means. It's fine. We'll just destroy the earth. We'll just destroy the earth to figure it out. Okay, so what does the term, excuse me. By the way, I actually started the stream like a whole like 30 minutes before the recording started. I had done forgot to push the button to start it. So I'm technically already about an hour into this, even though the stream has only been going for I don't know how long it's been going. The stream has not been going for as long as I've been on here. Let's just say it like that. So yeah, that's my life. I've made that mistake before. Okay, so let's see here. It's gonna talk in the correct, but let's see what this sounds like when I have it read it to me. It's always kind of fun to hear that.
I check it. So
I
you read that part about how running a proper architecture setup in a big company makes a grip of stuff.
a grip of
And you
stuff.
gotta have a system to handle it all, right?
Right.
Site 1508, and you want to know what they mean by architecture capability.
Yes, sir.
Basically, think of it like the skills and setup the company needs to actually do enterprise architecture work right. Site.
Okay, so architecture capability. Oh, so this is saying like not all companies have architecture and they have different degrees of capability to do architecture or none at all. I'm going to write this down. Architecture capability. Okay. So let's just listen to the whole thing and then I'll take my notes. I always stop too much.
4521. It ain't just about drawing diagrams, it's the whole package deal. The TOGAF standard breaks it down like this. Architecture capability is about the company's ability to actually develop, use, and keep the architecture going over time, and use that architecture to make sure changes happen the right way. Cite 4521. So, when that paragraph talks about needing a formal taxonomy, dedicated processes, and tools, cite 1508, that's all part of building up and having that architecture capability. It's the whole organizational machinery. The structures you put in place, like an architecture board, maybe, cite 3914. The people involved, their roles, what they're responsible for, and the skills they need, cite 3009.
I wish there was a way where I could get it to not read all that citation stuff. If I was using Chrome, I could just have speech if I read it, but it's fine. We'll just read it ourselves. So the structure you put in place, the people involved in their roles, what they're responsible for, and the skills they need, the processes you follow, like the ADM. ADM is architecture development model. We haven't gotten to that yet. I think that'll be Friday that we'll get to that, or Monday. The tools and resources you use. So, does this company actually have what it takes to do architecture work effectively? To do architecture work effectively. Okay, so that's going to include structures like the board. That's going to include people, processes, and then finally the tools. I'm really curious to know this enterprise repository where you're keeping all of these architecture things. Apparently, there's other stuff that fits in this enterprise repository too. Is this like GitHub or something like that? Let's just ask real quick. For the tools, what is used to store the enterprise repo and the repo? Is it Oh. By the way, if you're studying and you want to have another thing to use aside from Gemini, try Notebook LM, because you can have up to 50 files of resources in there, whereas Gemini only allows for 10. Gemini does have access to the internet and Canvas and all this other stuff too, which is why I like to use it. But if you're just looking to ask questions and you need to have a very broad selection of things, then Notebook LM is going to be superior just for that part. What are you thinking about, broski? This take forever. What's your answer? You didn't give me the answer. I noticed that like today and yesterday, Gemini has been thinking, but not actually showing the results of that thinking, which I don't know why, but it's kind of a weird bug. There's been some bugs in Gemini. Also, I noticed that the Canvas preview hasn't been working well. They must be up to something. So my bad. Didn't mean to leave you hanging. Here's the deal with the tools for those repositories. Chancer is looking at this. Doesn't tell you exactly which app tool to use. It's like they give you the blueprint for the car, but they don't tell you which brand of wrench you got to use to build it. Um, okay. Okay. So then what are the options? So what are companies using for the architecture repo? I just want to know. Hopefully it's something for free. Maybe this is like one of those things that you can get on Microsoft Azure or something. I could have just Googled this. Am I the only person that's ever like used AI to like solve a simple problem like adding two numbers or something like that? I know it's terrible. They're already telling us that saying thank you and being polite to AI is further destroying the earth, but me asking stupid questions also, I guess, contributes to that as well. Okay, so the big guns. These are softwares. So suites built specifically for enterprise art. Okay, so okay. Oh, they're TOGAF certified. So they line up with the standards way of doing things. Okay. Archie. Okay. Oh, law. I do not want to. In fact, if there was like a user interface that just looked like this, that would be nice. But let's check out. Let's just take a quick tangent and see what Archie is. Arch that thing. Sorry. Sorry. Let's get back on track. Archie. TOGAF. My mama had a boyfriend named Archie when I was a kid. He was he was a weird guy actually. I think he was like the mayor of San Antonio. Okay, Archie. Arch that thing. Um, okay, this is definitely giving open source. What is the most popular? I'm probably gonna download this anyways because I need to do some architecture for my own project, and it needs to be real, and I do not want to have a Google Drive folder. Um, and I also do not want to pay for Lucid Charts. Was that one of the options here? No, it wasn't even one of the options. Okay. Um, I have never heard of these. I ain't never heard of these. I would have thought that, these would be like names of things I've like heard people talking about in the background. I've never heard of any of these. Evolution Abacus. Oh, you can't even get a demo. One thing that bothers me is when there's like a technology that you need to know to get a job, but you can't learn it until you have a job because it's cost prohibitive. That just, and it probably has to do with the fact that the company that makes it just has not, probably just have not engineered it to be so. And they probably don't need to, quite frankly. Okay, well, we're going to get out of that one. What are the most popular ones? Let's see. These cats were the top right. Meaning score both high and both having the goods and knowing where the market's going. Orbis. So Blizz is our Mega seems to be the consistent one that's on both these lists. Let's check out Blizz design. I'm probably gonna end up just getting Archie because that's free, and I'm not paying for enterprise software to use on my desktop computer. That's overkill. Although I am all about an aesthetic, all about good design. Oh, they want to come show you. They don't want you to figure it out yourself. They're like, hey, let us come demo it for you so we can sell it to you. Okay. Yerd Bloom? That's a beautiful name. I just can't pronounce it. Okay, anyways. Okay. I wonder if this is one of those things where you make artifacts and stuff, and then there's someone who's like in charge of keeping the of actually keeping the tool and stuff organized. Or is this like something that runs as a service within an IT infrastructure that you just access through your computer instead of running it as an individual piece of software? Okay. So that's Blizz design. What was the other one? Mega. Megatron. Cause she a Megacon. It ain't about the race either. It's a marathon. Shout out to Nikki. Okay. Oh Lord. Okay. AI tools. Great. Perfect. Okay. All of these are like. Oh, they got careers. What kind of jobs you're hired for? Can you imagine being a software engineer for a software architecture company? Do you use the software architecture software to architect the software for the architecture software? That's a crazy loop de loop. It's a strange loop. Um, hmm. Oh, they're not even hiring. Okay, anyways, that's a distraction. Okay, so none of these companies are trying to let you see what's going on, really. Um, this is all just like corporate word salad to me at this point. Align IT with business, drive innovation. Okay, sure. I know what this is. This is the risk management matrix, or yeah, of sorts. Um, see how to start your transformation. What's pricing? They're probably gonna say, call us, we'll tell you. They're not gonna tell you. See, they're not gonna tell you the pricing. Why call it pricing? Okay. I need more details. What's the numerical quantity for each of these? They hate giving out prices on things. I'm just go. How do I call? They'd be like, "Hey, yo, how much it cost? What's the price? What's the price tag?" That's all I want to know. I don't want to see a demo. I don't even want to waste your time. Just tell me how much it costs, okay? Because otherwise, you're gonna waste both our time. Share a few details. Right person will contact you soon. Y'all don't want this money, do y'all? Y'all do not want the money. Okay. Well, so I think we're gonna use Archie. Yes, I think we're just gonna have to use Archie. A little arch. What's Archie beta? What's Archie beta? Is that like the new latest version? Okay, never mind. Never mind. There's no public one. So this was updated this year. Great. Is this Is Archie TOGAF compliant? Where's my music? I think we're almost time for a break as well. My distraction is communicating that to me. Um, okay, it is not officially. Oh, Archie Mate. So that's a different thing. Okay, wait. Okay, Archie Mate modeling. Okay. 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 It would be really annoying if this was not available on Mac. Uh, let's just download it and see. I mean, why wait? Why wait? I don't need all that. Let's just go ahead and drop that in there. Okay, and okay. So does this support multiple enterprises or wait? Let's close it. Let's come back. Uh-oh. It's a different screen now. How do I see that first screen? Um, well, well then, I have no clue what this all is. Okay, well, let's just go ahead and save this on the little dock or whatever, and then we'll come back to it later. I'll just use this for some planning stuff. This is great. So then when I start doing actual stuff, I don't have to do it in, hopefully not do it in Google Docs. User guide, cheat sheet. Okay, I'm gonna take a breakaroo. I've been streaming for an hour, including the time when I forgot to push the button to start the stream. So I'm gonna take a break, and I'll be back in, let's say, I'm gonna say 10 minutes, but y'all know I'll always be late, so it's gonna be probably 15, but let's just say 10 minutes. Don't go too far, but if you go anywhere, make sure you come back to the wolf pack. I'll be right here where you left me, or where I left you. Okay, so see you in a bit. Doobly doobly doo. Yo, 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 yo. I'm back. I'm back by popular demand. Okay, so let's get back into this. Before I left, I was taking a look at the Archie tool. This is it is a architecture repository application. How would they define it actually? What's their definition of what it is? Archimate modeling, an open source modeling toolkit for creating Archimate models and sketches used by enterprise architects everywhere. Targets all levels of enterprise architects and modelers to provide low costs to entry solution to users who may be making their first steps into Archimate modeling language, or who are looking for an open source cross-platform Archimate modeling tool for the company institution they wish to engage with the language within a TOGAF or other enterprise architecture framework. Open source independent enterprise that supports the description, analysis, visualization, architecture within and across business domains. Fully aligned with TOGAF. Okay. I'm not going to spend too much time on this right now, but I did have one question. Would I be able to use Archimate for software architecture and solutions architecture as well? Another way I could approach this too is I could look at some enterprise architecture job listings and see if they reference a specific software. Let's actually do that while that loads. Enterprise architect job. Let's see what they list here as a skill set. Ooh, Genesis 10. Okay. I said ooh because I know some people over there. That is taking a long time. Job Rapido is taking forever. It is not Rapido. Let's try, let's see what Amazon is using. And let's go 2 more. Let's check out. Look at that salary range. That's what I'm talking about. 150. I really need the 200 something, but I'll take the 150. I've never gotten paid that much before. Let's do. Oh wait, that's the wrong one. This is not it. Let's see what software architect one has, and let's check out. Let's check out a different website. $19,000 a month. Hold up. Hold up. That's a lot of money a month for FedEx? Wait, where's my phone at? $19,000. How much is that a year? Sorry, I have to know this. I'm not money motivated, but I am a little bit. I want that much money. $19,000 for 12 months. $228,000. That's a lot of money. Whenever you apply for a job and they give you a range, get the highest. Go ahead and get you the highest range. $495,000. Sorry. Get it together. Okay, so let's look at the job descriptions and see. This did not take me where I wanted to go. Sure. Nope, I don't want to do all this. Okay, let's just look here then. Strategic. Fair growth opportunities. Okay, cool. Emerging technology trends. Cool. Cloud computing. AI security. Cool. Cloud. Yes, sir. This does not say anything about specific tools. High school diploma, yay! Okay. I have one of those, I guess. If I got paid $494,000 a year, I would work for 10 years and be done. And I would probably only need to live on the 95, to be honest. After taxes, though, that's probably going to be closer to 300. But still, that's correct. I can't believe people make that. I really cannot believe people make that much money. It just doesn't make sense to me that people make that much money and they don't give it away for free. They don't just give me some for free. Okay, this is more reasonable. Let's see. This is CVS Health. Starter code reference implementations. I like that. I know I'm going to love being a software enterprise architect. It doesn't say anything here about specific software. See, I already have the AI experience, you know what I'm saying? Early adopter or whatnot, what have you. Director of enterprise architecture, maybe. That seems kind of low. Project management pimp. That's what I'm reading. PMP certified. There's too many of these. This doesn't say anything about TOGAF in here. Archimate modeling. Look at that. Okay, so cool. Yeah. What is 134 an hour translate to? Okay, I gotta get back to my thing because I can sit here and do numbers. I love looking at numbers and money and numbers for money and money numbers. What is 134 an hour for a year salary? 278. Sorry, I'm getting too excited. I wonder how long it would take me to get up to that much money. One thing I learned, by the way, is you do not want to be in a position where you're getting paid a lot of money for a job you cannot do. You do not want to be in that position. That is uncomfortable. But project management, this might be a certification that I could do as well. Someone actually told me recently that this could be a good thing to do. Maybe this will be what I do after TOGAF. Okay, well, let's get back to our study. Okay, where are we at? We gotta start moving a little bit faster. I only have an hour left, and as fun as this has been, I do not want to be here all day doing this. So, is my stream still going? Yep, there we go. Okay, so let's.
The TOGAF standard provides a structural framework for an architecture repository, as shown in Figure 3, that allows an enterprise to distinguish between different types of architectural assets that exist at different levels of abstraction in the organization. This architecture repository is one part of the wider enterprise repository, which provides the capability to link architectural assets to components of the detailed design, deployment, and service management repositories. Figure 3. Overview.
So the enterprise repository has other parts. So we have configuration management database, CMDB, not IMDB. We got service management repositories. Okay, so this is like ServiceNow type stuff. My dad works in that area. Service management. Development repositories, where the code lives. And deployment. See, I feel like a person who is a software engineer or any of those types of things, I feel like you should have the understanding of all of this stuff and like where you fit in. At least that would have helped me at the beginning of my career understand like where am I in this business? And how does my role, I didn't quite understand like the boundaries of my role, I guess. That's always kind of a struggle for me. Okay, so let's take a look at this diagram. So within the enterprise repository, there are, oh, I forgot to include architecture repository here. So within the enterprise repository, which is the big thing, it's the enterprise repository, there are 6 different sub sections. There's the architecture repository, there's the configuration management database, the service management repositories, development repositories, that's where the actual code lives, design stores. What's the design stores again? Okay. Design stores. So like when you have a design meeting or whatever, that does not happen within the architecture stuff. That happens on its own separately. And then there's deployment repositories and tools. And then the architecture repository is where you're going to be storing these assets that are along the architecture continuum and the solutions landscape as well, or solutions continuum. Okay, so starting from the top here, the meta model is any specific vocabulary or language that applies to the enterprise that is not from the generic framework. The architecture method, I don't know what architecture method means. Oh, here, let's just read through these and we'll come back to the graphic.
The architecture metamodel describes the organizationally tailored application of an architecture framework, including a metamodel for architecture content. The architecture capability defines the parameters, structures, and processes that support governance of the architecture repository. The architecture landscape presents an architectural representation of assets in use or planned by the enterprise at particular points in time. The standards library captures the standards with which new architectures must comply, which may include industry standards, selected products and services from suppliers, or shared services already deployed. 16. The Open Group 2023, Chapter 2, Concepts 2.1. TOGAF Content Framework and Enterprise Metamodel. The reference library provides guidelines, templates, patterns, and other forms of reference material that can be leveraged in order to accelerate the creation of new architectures for the enterprise. The governance repository provides a record of governance activity across the enterprise. The architecture requirements repository provides a view of all authorized architecture requirements which have been agreed with the architecture board. The solutions landscape presents an architectural representation of the solution building blocks, SBBs, supporting the architecture landscape which have been planned or deployed by the enterprise. 2.
Okay, it didn't tell me everything about this. Let's just ask, what is architecture method? The architecture suppository. Okay. We're pretty much talking about the architecture development method. Okay, the ADM. And the ADM is those phases A through H. So developing a vision, developing the business architecture, information systems architecture, technology architecture, opportunity solutions, migration planning, implementation governance, change management, and requirements. So these are like all the steps that are involved in the capability that are like looped through. Starting from vision, leading to management, or leading to change. Oh, okay. Standards or guidelines. So when we say building blocks, There's a lot of stuff in here that I don't know yet, but I'm gonna take it that if it has not been mentioned at this point, it may not be necessary to know it quite yet. Okay. Solution building blocks to support the architecture landscape, which have been planned and deployed. Um, let's get some explanation of this. Architecture landscape is the capabilities. Architectural landscape is made of building blocks. So the building blocks are capabilities. Solution building blocks are specific. Okay. Um, okay. So the solutions landscape is a map showing the specific SBBs.
The TOGAF content framework and enterprise meta model define a formal structure and also provide guidance for organizations that wish to implement their architecture within an architecture tool. The content framework defines a categorization framework to be used to structure the architecture description, the work product used to express an architecture, and the collection of models that describe the architecture.
This is another thing that content framework was another term that does not appear in the terminology list, but I think I looked at it yesterday. So the content framework is an organizing system for different types of blueprints, segmented into categories. It's like a checklist, but how does that differ from the architecture repository? That's the question I have. It sounds like the same thing. Is the architecture repository a type of content framework? How does the content framework differ from the architecture repository? Oh, content framework, not architecture framework. Content framework. Thank goodness for whiteout. Whiteout's definitely top 5, top 3 of my Mount Rushmore of office supplies. Content framework is like the blueprint for organizing your stuff. It's the structure, the filing system, a set of categories that tell you what kind of architecture information you should create. So, categories of what kind of arc. And how it fits together. Okay, and then the architectural repository is the actual place where things are stored. I cannot imagine having to study like this while having a day job. It would take forever, especially because consistency with this amount of things would be really difficult. Enterprise meta model defines types of entities that appear in the models and describes the enterprise together with the relationships between these entities. It allows architectural concepts to be captured, stored, filtered, queried. The stored, query, traceability stuff, that's what I don't know. Okay, so enterprise meta model, it's all about defining types of things, entities, and connections when you're modeling enterprise architecture. I'm hungry again. Okay, I got 27 minutes before I gotta get off here. I gotta be somewhere at what time is it? I gotta be somewhere at 6:30. Okay. Yeah, and I want to take a nap. I'm tired. Okay, so enterprise meta model defines the types of entities appear in the meta model. It describes enterprise. Okay. This means that meta model tells you exactly what kinds of building blocks you're allowed to use when you draw your architecture diagrams. Okay, so like business actor. What are the other examples? Data entity, etc. etc. Since everything is defined consistently, you or a tool can easily search through your models. Like, show me all connections to the CRM system. Oh, okay, that makes sense. So the meta model is like, it sounds like a thing where these building blocks are reusable between diagrams, but they're all like labeled in a consistent way, so you can see all diagrams that use the same building block. Like if you were like, what are all the diagrams that involve business actor or a specific data entity, you could search through all of them that way. That's pretty cool. That's very cool. It's better than doing it on Confluence. A bunch of JPEG images. I'll tell you that. Okay, so this makes it easy to search. Okay, consistency. Of course. Traceability. Okay, thank you. So this whole thing, see, this is another thing where I feel like they don't explain what the image means. They just put this image here. Let me nope, wrong thing. Let me just take a screenshot. We're gonna upload the screenshot into this. To explain this image. Nobody is answering my little survey. What's your favorite? What's the best pizza topping? My opinion is that if I had to choose these, I would go with pepperoni, but I'm really a cheese guy. But a pepperoni is the least offensive of these options, and definitely not pineapple. Pineapple does not belong on a pizza. In fact, nothing sweet belongs in a savory dish. Let's just go ahead and say that. Okay, back to this. This diagram right here is so it's the content framework. Okay. This is the content framework. So these are all the different types of architectural content. Can I make a note here? Let's just do this the messy way. Let's do red. Okay, let's just copy that text. And as a qualifier, we'll just add my little quick definition. So categories. Justification. Actually, let's do. I don't like that. We'll just have to use this. So, queries. What kind of Oh, it says it right here, content framework overview. Well, They should have made that more obvious. And let's make this text blue. And we can do a like that. There you go. Okay. This is gap analysis. I don't know what locations is. I'm not gonna look at this entire thing, but we have different sections, I guess. I gotta make my notes. I feel like they should have mentioned this part earlier in the chapter. It seems like it's like not where it's supposed to be. Ugh. Where does this say architecture deliverables? The left column. Do y'all see it? I don't see architecture deliverables in here in this image. Artifacts is the middle column. I don't know what this is talking about. What is the last one? Building blocks, right column. I don't feel like I know what this is referring to. What you said doesn't seem to align with the graphic. Did I put the wrong image in here? No, I got the right image.
Discovery's 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
Um, let's try this. I don't think that this is. I think this is something weird's happening here. Let's go to content framework. Is this graphic different? Well, it's simpler. That's for one. Can I paste this in here? Oh, I guess I can't. Okay, this is much better. Okay, I don't want to belabor this part too much, but this is going to be something I'm going to have to revisit. Oh, that didn't come out good. So we have architecture principles, vision, and requirements. Then we have architecture definition. And then we have architecture realizations. Okay. I have 20 minutes left. What I'm going to do is I'm going to peruse these last. I really have 3 sections left. I'm going to peruse. I'm going to figure out what should I focus on. I have a feeling the architecture capability is going to be the one I need to pay attention to the most. I understand the risk management portion really well. It's also really short. And I understand the gap analysis really well because I also did an interactive tool yesterday. So I think I'm just going to do this in architecture capability, and then I'm going to do my end of stream rant or whatever, and then I'm going to get off. Okay, so it's a big picture. The cycle, the outer ring. Let's put this side by side. Oops. Come on, man. Stop messing with me. Okay, so the cycle is change management. Okay. So this doesn't explicitly say it, but this is ADM, the architecture development method. And that method starts with having an architecture vision, and that comes from the preliminary requirements. And that phase is going to go through. So in that more detailed example, there's like the business capabilities and all this stuff here, business strategy and all this stuff. This is all going to help make the vision. And then once you have that, then you identify the business architecture. Then you do the information systems, and then you do the technology. This does not have anything about opportunities and solutions. I don't see that in here. But then there's the migration planning, which is going to be this stuff down here, and implementation governance. And then the change management happens at the end, and that's the procedures for managing the change. So this is, once again, change management. So this is saying that these are all the things that you can make in relationship to change management. And the change management is facilitated by the ADM process. So these two graphics are saying that these are the pieces of content that are made during the AM phases and leading to change management. Okay. So I guess the thing that's important is to know where are you in this ADM process or method. And when you know where you are in the method, then you know what you have to define in order to move to the next stage. So you need to know where you are in the ADM method so that you can produce the correct content to add to the repository, the architecture repository before moving to the next phase, leading to the change management. Also, no, let's just ask that question right now. Cool. Okay. Sounds great to me. I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to continue forth. We got one more section to read here, and then what does my study plan say? Yeah, I can do all of this basically. Okay, so let's just get through this last question. Architectural capability. Okay, it is necessary to put in place to place an appropriate business capability of architecture, roles, responsibilities, skills, processes, and enterprise architecture capability is the ability to develop, use, and sustain the architecture of a particular enterprise and to use architecture to govern change. Um, Barring architecture. So the architecture part of a business has a lot of different roles. That's a good question to ask. So architecture capability. By the way, the preview app is like my Mount Rushmore of like top study tools. Um, it is definitely the go. You do not need Adobe Acrobat. I hate Adobe Acrobat. As far as I'm concerned, it is bloatware. The only thing that's missing from this that I would like to have is, actually that might be it. Yep, that's what I actually wanted. Um, the ability to do little notes. So yeah, it has everything you could want, which is nice. The only thing is that this will cover it up. So it'd be nice to have the notes kind of like outside the document, kind of like Google Docs or Microsoft, like a little comment thing on the side. But it is what it is. You could just load this into Google Docs, I guess. So this has architecture board, which is really the governing body. Let's take a screenshot and then we'll put that screenshot in here, so I can answer it in context to my screen shot. Let's also make sure that this doesn't look different, because apparently the graphics in the latest are different from the study guide. Yeah, let's just copy this. What? I'm sorry, this is crazy looking. What is this? Okay, I gotta come back to this. I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave that close. I'm gonna come back to this stuff eventually anyways. Let's just stick with what we gotta do today. Hey yo, if you're on the stream, all one of you out there, let me know what's the best pizza topping. I don't think I can do my own poll, but my answer is that pepperoni is the least offensive out of these four options, and pineapple to me is, my thing with the pineapple on the pizza, to be honest, is that it always leaves a little soggy sweet spot underneath where the pineapple is. And as a kid, I remember I have very extensive memories of picking the pineapples off because it just felt weird to eat them with the pizza. But then even after picking them off, it would still be pineapple tasting. And don't even get me started on the mixture of it wasn't salt. It was like pineapple and it was like what's Hawaiian? Is that what it's called when it's like pineapple and like bologna or something? I don't know. I think people just be throwing things on pizzas. Anyways, don't let me discourage you from choosing your favorite topping. I'm not here to judge. Uh, but let me know. Do the poll. Uh, I'm super curious. Okay, so let's see here. So let me ask it again. Actually, let's just do the explanation of the diagram. So enterprise repository, outermost box. This does not seem like it is telling me about the graphic that I'm looking at here. Is that just me? It's not me. It actually isn't telling me about the graphic. Okay, that's fine. Let me go back to the former question though. So the roles are because I'll probably have to be one of these specific roles first. So EA architect, business architect, data architect, application, technology architect. I've definitely seen solutions architect. Um, more detailed designs for the solution. This is what you could get paid big bucks at Amazon to do. It's kind of salesy. Design and engineers who actually build and implement solutions based on architecture designs. Project managers, they manage the project that delivers changes based on the architecture. They often work with architects via things like architecture contracts. IT operations run the systems once they've built. They give input on what's practical to operate and maintain, and the business leaders and users. Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. So you have these different roles and responsibilities. They require knowledge, and that knowledge comes from professional development, which also it improves professional development improves skills and knowledge. Um, and architecture professionals possess skills and knowledge from professional development. Okay. And there are different types of roles and responsibilities. So therefore, there are different types of architecture um, professionals. This is all. I mean, this is all makes sense, but this is like a salad of boxes, basically. So project portfolio governance. They participate. So I guess it's like the architecture people. They are a community of practitioners that together do governance, and they create the contract. Tell me about the contracts. Use between governance and project. So the architects, they're like, hey, we need this thing be designed. We need someone to make it. And then they go out, they talk to a team or whatever, and they say, hey, can you do this? Will you do this? This is how you should do it. Do it like this. And they give them a contract that describes what they need to have built. And I guess the engineering manager, they're the person who is like the interface between, I don't know, like is the director the first person in that conversation? I guess the director knows like the human resources and assets that can do the work. The architecture board just knows the work that needs to be done. So there, maybe that's how that works. But the contract is a formal agreement. To follow approved architecture. See, when you get a tech job, they do not tell you this stuff. I promise you. Unless you work for a company that like has an actual education, or like an internship or something like that. If you go to a boot camp, if you are a self learner or any of that kind of stuff, you would not know where you fit within the organization, the technology organization of company. There's just no way you would know that unless you went out and studied on your own, because nobody is going to sit down and tell you. They're just going to be like, build this thing. Because reading all this and stuff, it's like, oh, well, this all makes sense now. That's what all these people around me are doing. You know, this is like how all this stuff is connected. But people don't like just sit down and explain it to you. I think a lot of people probably don't even necessarily know, because you don't need to know all this stuff necessarily to do the software engineering. But I just think like when people think about like making technology, sometimes all people think about is the software engineering or the feature development type of work, the coding and whatnot. Maybe project management and like UX, UI stuff like that. But all of that work, all of those epics and whatnot, like they all come from somewhere. And they don't come from the project managers. Project managers, they just manage project. They don't come from the product owners necessarily. The product owner, they just handle that relationship between like the customer, the stakeholders, and stuff like that. Um, that doesn't come from the engineering manager. The engineering manager just makes sure the work gets done according to the contract. It doesn't come from the director. The director just connects with those human resources and manages. They're a leader of people, a leader of leaders. So the architecture board, they're the ones who understand the business requirements, and then they do all this work to architect some type of solution, and then they pass it down the gravy train. Okay. Okay, so this governance comes from the governance body. So there's probably other governance bodies aside from the architecture board, and that larger governance body sets the priority and focus, and then the architecture board, they create the contract for the actual projects and portfolios, and then all of that stuff ends up in the architecture repository. And then this enterprise continuum determines the classification. Well, really, it's going to be the content framework is going to determine all the things that are needed and how it fits together. How is the enterprise continuum used in the relationship between project, portfolio, and architecture repository? so close to being done. This might be the last question. So it's a big library. Yeah, that would be my Archie mate. So library's main cataloging system, organizing things into. Okay, so they're not gonna like sit down and be like, oh, we're gonna make a new diagram. They're gonna go and find existing diagrams, models, and charts and whatever, and they're gonna figure out which ones can be used, like that are generic and reusable, like references and whatnot. And then they're gonna start from that. And then I guess the challenge here is how do you make sure that these things are up to date and who's responsible for making sure they're up to date. I guess it's going to depend on the strength of the contracts because so my experience um in my experience I worked my first job was an R&D role. We might have had contracts and stuff, but I know that we had a lot of, at least for the developer side of things, we had a lot of infrastructure and stuff that was outdated in terms of the documentation that was present for us. I don't know where it came from. They didn't really explain that to us. And we had an awful lot of design meetings that seemed like um, we were doing the solutioning, but there might have been an architecture that was already available, and maybe we were just doing the solutioning end of that. My second job, um, I don't know. I don't know what was going on there. That place did not have architecture practices. I don't know what they was doing. We'll skip that. The third place I worked at, it was a lot of like refactoring and taking existing things and migrating and stuff like that. So we did have we had one person who was kind of carrying the load of all the architecture stuff for our team. It was an analytics job, but I didn't get the sense that we had an architecture review board per se that followed this framework. It felt like maybe there was just one person responsible for it, and I don't really know what he was using for. He used a lot of whiteboarded, like a lot of whiteboard. I don't think I ever saw like hardly an official diagram. I remember taking a lot of my own notes because of that. So yeah, maybe I just haven't worked for a place that has like a really strong architecture capability. Hmm. But this makes sense. You don't start off from nothing. You go and look for things and use this continuum to figure out where to start in that search. So looking for generic things, but then also there may be like specific things that have been created that you can possibly use as well too. Um, and then when you finish, then you got to figure out where the new things fit within the continuum. Are you making, and ideally make things that are reusable because it'll save you time and energy in the future. So the continuum is an organizational concept. Okay, cool beans. Well, I think that ends our study session. Um, Let me look at my guide really quick. By the way, if you're just joining me, if you go check the link down in the description, you'll see that there is a link to my study guide. This is what I'm using for the level 1 foundations certification. This is a 4-week plan, only 4 days a week. So you could stretch it out if you wanted to, if you felt a little bit more ambitious, but this plan here makes it very achievable. Um, you know, yeah, you can do it. We did day 3 today, day 3 of week 1. I have touched base with all of these things. I have my notes here that I took off screen. Um, I already did the practice quiz for chapter 2 yesterday because I read all of chapter 2 last night. So I think I'm good. Um, Tomorrow there will not be a study stream, but I may hop on. I'm not gonna make any promises. Actually, I'm just gonna force myself to rest. How about that? I'll rest. If I do anything, it won't be on the stream. But expect me to be back on Friday to end the week. I'll be back on Friday. Let me check my calendar. I'll be back somewhere around noon or so on Friday to do some terminology. I'm going to read all of chapter 3. Chapter 3 is just a big old dictionary. Yeah, it's just a big dictionary of terms. And these are all things that, a lot of these are things that I already have covered. So it won't be too intense. How many pages is this? 31. So 4 pages. So not too much. And then some testing. I'm gonna treat tomorrow as a review day, and maybe do some like AI generated self quizzing or something like that tomorrow. But that's a good way to round off a week. Yeah, and I only have 3 more of them left after this, so we're making our way downtown, walking fast. Pace is fast, and I'm homebound. Okay. So before I leave, I always want to give like a little spiel. You know, I'm a little spielmeister. What's my spiel for today? Let me just recap on what I've learned. So I'm a software engineer. That's my main trade, my main skill. And for the past 2.5 years, I was a software engineering instructor at a boot camp here in the city that I live in. And I will say that everybody, I think, should have an experience being a teacher, because when you get to be a teacher, it gives you a very high level perspective of what it means to learn. And the process of helping other people learn, you get to see a lot of the mistakes that occur in that process. And it gives you a clearer idea of how to shoot more directly towards whatever the learning goals that you might have for yourself are. Um, so when I'm thinking about preparing for this certification, my mindset isn't to just read the book. My mindset is to come into contact with as much of the information as I can, but in a way where I'm actually interacting and working with that knowledge, transforming it into my own way of thinking and speaking, um, using some mechanical activity. When you write things down, you're more likely to remember them. You're going to have better recall. When you start to look for connections that are not explicitly in the writing as well. If your only process in studying is just to read and highlight, you're missing out on all the juice. You're missing out on all the wonderful things that you could be getting out of having a more depthful approach. Now, I will say as well, when you spend more time interacting with the information, especially if it's like a coherent curriculum, you're going to build up inertia. So usually when someone designs a syllabus for a whole course of work, usually that curriculum is developed to be cumulative. What that means is that what you learn at the beginning is continuously built on, I should go this direction, continuously built on until you get to the end goal. And every step and every stage along the way builds on whatever was learned before. So it might seem really intense at the beginning when you're being super detailed and you're thinking really hard and you're diving really deep into things and asking all those questions. But if you make a good habit of uncovering the ambiguities and the gaps in your knowledge, what you're going to find is that as you make your way through whatever the coursework is, you're going to build up this inertia and it's going to become progressively easier and faster to learn whatever the next new thing is. Now, it's hard to feel that way, especially when you're learning in a new domain of knowledge that you've never worked in before. But that's how that works, right? So, we're making this big upfront investment in being really meticulous and really detailed in our study habits initially, because it's going to pay off bigly when we start to get towards the end of this content. I'm going to have to do less um, doubling back to understand vocabulary. I'm going to have to do less doubling back to understand the connections between things. um, by the time we get towards the end, i should be able to I should have migrated from a feeling of discomfort and unease to a feeling of confidence and the ability to take the material and have a sense of ownership over it. That's really the goal. Whenever you're learning something, especially a skill that you're using for work or for your vocation, your occupation, the main goal is not the certification. The main goal is not the certification. It is not the ability to say I did it or got to the end. The goal is that you own that information, that you can use it, and then most importantly, that you're confident enough to start to bend and break the rules because things are seldom and the out in the wild, they're seldom as they're described in books. Whether it's a specific technology, whether it's a framework, whether it's a business practice. Um, None of these things are ever as they're described in the book. People always will customize and butcher butcher things as well. Okay, so by making it your goal to get to that ownership level, to be able to make those abstract connections that are not explicitly explained, you're going to be able to take this stuff beyond. You're going to be able to build on it as well. And then hopefully you'll become an expert and you'll be able to introduce things that may not have been considered before. So that's the goal that I have in mind as I making my way downtown, walking fast. You know, um, that's my goal, and that's reflected in my study strategy. So when I'm making all of this collateral for my notes and stuff, this is what's getting me there. This is what's getting me there. Might I add another thing too? When you're learning, imposter syndrome is a big challenge for a lot of people. When you go through your learning process and you give yourself lots of collateral, I call these like study receipts. Okay. Now, obviously, you want to go back and look at your notes. Don't just make this stuff and never look at it again. If you don't look at it again, you will probably be fine because this will amount to a great deal of memory. But as far as the confidence and the imposter syndrome, in those moments when you just don't feel like you're getting it or you're like feeling bad about yourself, low about yourself, maybe you had a bad day, maybe you just can't seem to wrap your head around something, this being able to see your effort, that's where your confidence is going to come from. You cannot always control the pace of your learning. You can do little things here and there to optimize, um, but you cannot always control how fast you learn. You cannot always, especially when you're learning new things, you don't know what's around every corner, what's around every nook, cranny, and bend, right? But at the end of the day, you can look and say, okay, I showed up. I showed up yesterday. I showed up the day before. This was my part. This was me doing what I needed to do. And whatever happens, happens. So I encourage you, whatever you're trying to do, learn, master in this world, keep a good receipt of your endeavor. and use that for your confidence. Don't get your confidence from comparing whether or not you are better than someone else, or don't get your confidence from a test. Don't get your confidence from whether or not you passed the first time or not. Nobody will ever care or remember any of that stuff. Get your confidence from whether or not you showed up. And having a good receipt, having a good highlightation, having some type of documented evidence that you showed up, that's for you. And then it also, by the way, is very, very useful for making content on your preferred social media platform, because when people want to know the quality of your understanding, these things help as well. Uh, this isn't always apparent on my. I'm going to show you something really quick before I go. Let me show you. I don't want to put all my business out here. Here we go. We'll just do it this way. It's not always apparent just from my streams, but whenever I finish my streams up, I almost always will go on LinkedIn and I will make a post. And in my posts on LinkedIn, I will try to give a blurb or some information about what my stream was, but most importantly, you can see here, take a screenshot of the stream, right? Here are some things that I made in this stream. This was my matrix that I made for the for gap analysis. Look, I have the screenshots of the physical notes I took. This is all great stuff, right? Because when you start to apply for jobs, what's going to happen? They're going to say, "Hey, give me a link to your LinkedIn profile." And then what you're going to do is you're going to post this stuff frequently and regularly, treat it like a blog, basically. And then when they come perusing on your account to see what you done did, they're gonna see all these juicy pieces of evidence that show that you didn't just come out of nowhere. Okay, because that's one of the things about, because I've been on the interviewing side, and it's really hard to say yes to someone when you don't know. You know, like, how do you know what you know? You know, did you just sit back and take a bunch of tests, or did you actually dive into the content? Do you actually know what you're talking about? This is how you prove that. So do this today. Do this yesterday, in fact. Do it that quickly. And then the other thing here is I always try to do a summary of what was it that I talked about? What is it that I learned? How did I do this? Are there any tips and tricks? If you can share a resource, share a resource. I always share the link to the stream and stuff like that. So these are my little blurbs and takeaways for the end of today's study session. Take this with a grain of salt, but just know that your confidence does not have to come from whether or not you pass a test or how you measure up against someone else or anything else like that. Compete with yourself if you're going to compete, but you don't have to compete. You can simply just show up and do what you got to do and keep it pushing, okay? Because after this, I'm going to take down this green screen. I'm going to go mind my business, and I'm not going to think about this probably for the rest of the day. And I can do that comfortably because I know that I showed up, and I can go watch my stream and see my 3-hour work session, and it is what it is, okay? You can't control the future. So anyways, that's my little blurb for the day. Thank you so much for coming by. I'll see you Friday. I'll see you Friday at noonish or whatever. I don't know. You know I'm very irregular with this. But anyways, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the bell so you can get notifications whenever I am getting ready to go live. I will always typically give about a 30-minute or whatever, warning or whatever before I get on. And if you're watching this in the middle of the day, you probably ain't got no job, so you might as well come by and hang out with me too and get your study on as well. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to get off of here and take a quick nap and do what I got to do for whatever I got to do. Okay, I'll catch you later. Adios. If you're still here, by the way, there's a survey that I have in my description. If you could be so kind as to go fill out my survey, it helps a lot because I want to grow this channel, and a huge part of making that possible is hearing from you. And I would love to know more about what you need, what you want, and what you'd like to see on this channel. Thanks for sticking with me. This is Key, and you're watching Primitive.